Back in 2017, I was fresh out of college and working at a small family restaurant. Money was tight, and my roommate and I were living with her family while saving up for our own place. I needed a second job, and she needed any job at all, which was tough for her because of multiple leg injuries and other health problems. One day, I spotted a new restaurant getting ready to open right on the same street as my current job. Perfect location, I thought. I grabbed two applications and we both filled them out. The next day on my day off, we went in for interviews. The manager smiled at us from across the desk and told us something that should have been our first red flag. She said the interview was really just a formality because she was going to hire us both anyway. We thought this was great news. The place was going to be a 24-hour diner, similar to those big chain breakfast places, but with a 50s theme. It was perfectly positioned across from several bars, so late night business seemed guaranteed. The woman interviewing us mentioned she used to manage one of those big waffle chain restaurants, so we figured she knew what she was doing. Since the interior was still under construction, management told us they'd text when training started. We waited and waited. 2 months later, we finally got that text. Training was a disaster. These people had absolutely no idea how to run a restaurant. Imagine the worst restaurant you've ever seen on those cooking shows where the famous chef comes in to fix everything. Now make it worse. We couldn't take breaks no matter how long our shifts were. We couldn't even drink water in front of customers. And the things we found in the food storage areas would make you never want to eat out again. Here's the important part about my roommate's situation. This was a two-story restaurant, and she had made absolutely sure that management knew about her leg injuries during the interview process. Every single time it came up, they promised they wouldn't put her upstairs where she'd have to constantly go up and downstairs carrying food and drinks. On soft opening night, guess where they put her? Upstairs. When she asked to switch sections with another waitress, the managers coldly told her to just get over it. That other waitress I mentioned? She was the manager's niece. The favoritism was so obvious it hurt to watch. This girl couldn't do anything right. She dropped plates constantly, took forever to enter orders into the computer system, and couldn't even make a basic vanilla milkshake without messing it up. My roommate, being the decent person she is, kept helping the niece figure out the computer system. It was genuinely confusing software that crashed multiple times every day, but apparently helping someone do their job was a mistake. The next thing we knew, the niece had run to her aunt claiming my roommate had pushed her away from the computers and was stealing her customers. Complete lies. But management ate it up. Other waitresses quickly backed up my roommate's version of events, but the damage was done. After that, it became obvious that management was looking for any excuse to fire us both. They couldn't find legitimate reasons because we actually did our jobs well and had no write-ups. The niece kept trying to pin fake bullying accusations on us, but other staff members always contradicted her stories. July 13th, 2017 was the day everything exploded. I had the day off, but my roommate was working. My aunt and uncle were visiting from Minnesota, and my parents suggested we all go to the diner for dinner to support my roommate and try out the new place. The kitchen completely screwed up my uncle's order. We're talking about a sandwich that was so badly made, it was basically inedible. My uncle, being polite about it, asked to speak with the manager to explain the problem. He was very clear about what was wrong with the food, but the manager told my roommate that my uncle's complaint was about her service, not the kitchen's mistake. My family left after dinner, but I stayed behind since I was my roommate's ride home. She was working downstairs that night, thankfully. About 30 minutes after my family left, I was waiting for a milkshake I'd ordered and realized I hadn't seen my roommate in a while. I'd noticed her leaning against the wall earlier, probably because her leg was bothering her, but now she was nowhere to be found. Then I saw her coming down the stairs. She didn't look at me, just walked straight to the milkshake station and politely asked another waitress to let her by so she could get her backpack. I knew exactly what had happened. The office was upstairs, and getting your backpack during a shift only meant one thing. I watched her go into the restroom and come out in her street clothes instead of the uniform. One of the hosts came over asking if we were okay. She walked right past him and out the door. I told him to cancel my milkshake and followed her outside. The host followed us, still asking if everything was all right. My roommate spun around and her voice carried across the parking lot when she yelled that they had fired her because she leaned against the wall for 45 seconds. I was furious. I told her to wait for me and walked back into that building. One of the managers was already downstairs and I called out to get her attention. Thanks to my theater background, I knew how to project my voice so everyone in the building could hear me when I announced that because they had fired my roommate over an injury they knew about, they could consider my employment terminated as well. Later, my roommate filled me in on the whole story. Management had been creating fake write-ups against her, making up false customer complaints like the one about my uncle, and documenting phony incidents to build a case for firing her. The bullying accusations from the niece were just another tool in their arsenal. But here's where things get interesting. My roommate's family has connections. Good connections. Her family knows people high up in city and state government, including the county sheriff and one of our state senators. One of her family members arranged a meeting with that senator, and my roommate told him everything that had happened at the diner. He was appalled and immediately gave her contact information for the labor board and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. While she was filing complaints with the proper authorities, I started a social media campaign. I created a hashtag on Facebook telling our story and asked all my friends to share it. When we were out in town and the conversation turned to local restaurants, we made sure to warn people about how this place treated their employees and asked them to spread the word. The story took on a life of its own. My roommate started overhearing complete strangers, including lawyers, talking about the diner's problems while she sat in the coffee shop waiting for me to get off work at my other job. My boss at my primary job had heard all our complaints and frustrations while we were still working at the diner. Once we quit, she and her entire staff joined us in making jokes and throwing shade at the place when it came up in conversation. She joked that the drunks were the only reason that place was staying open. My co-workers were actively looking for dirt on the diner, and on November 13th, 2017, exactly 4 months to the day after the firing incident, one of the cooks at my main job asked me if I had heard that the diner was closed now. I had to pull out my phone and check the local news. Sure enough, there it was in black and white. The diner was closing their doors, effective immediately. Their official excuse was management changes and claimed it was only temporary, but that was clearly garbage. To this day, that space sits empty and boarded up. My roommate and I went out for celebratory milkshakes that very night. We never expected our complaints to actually shut the whole place down, but we don't regret making those calls or posting on social media for even a second. I was 19 when I got my first real job at Wonderland Amusement Park in my hometown. My parents weren't thrilled about my decision to leave school, but they understood when our family hit some financial rough patches after my dad's hours got cut at the factory. The park wasn't huge like Six Flags or anything, but it was decent sized for our small city. Most of the rides were perfect for little kids, with bright colors and gentle spins that wouldn't scare anyone under 10. But we had a handful of more intense rides for the teenagers and adults who wanted a real thrill. I've been working there for about 6 months, mostly operating the kiddie rides, when my supervisor finally promoted me to run one of the bigger attractions. The ride I got assigned to was called the Sky Swinger. It was basically a swing ride that lifted you about 30 feet in the air and spun you around at a pretty good speed. The safety requirements were strict because the only thing keeping riders secure was a single metal bar that locked across their stomach. If someone was too small, they could easily slip right under that bar and fall. The height requirement was clearly posted everywhere, and we had to measure every single kid who seemed even remotely close to the minimum. That Tuesday started like any other day. The weather was perfect, and families were already lining up for rides when I opened my station at 10 a.m. Everything was going smoothly for the first few hours until I noticed this woman and her son getting in line for my ride. The kid was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I could tell from across the platform that he was nowhere near tall enough. He was at least 6 inches shorter than our posted requirement. Since they were still pretty far back in line, I figured I'd save everyone some time and let them know early. I walked over to where they were waiting and politely explained that her son might be too short for this ride. I suggested they try the smaller version of the same ride over by the entrance that would be perfect for him. The woman looked me up and down like I just insulted her entire family. Her expression was pure ice. She told me coldly that they were going to wait there anyway. I tried to be helpful and explained that they'd just be wasting their time, but she turned away from me completely. Fine, I thought. I had other riders to take care of, and I couldn't stand there arguing all day. But I knew this was going to be a problem when they got to the front. About 20 minutes later, they finally made it to my station. The little boy was practically bouncing with excitement, and I almost felt bad about what I had to do next. I pulled out my measuring stick and had him stand against it. Just as I'd expected, he was way too short. I apologized and explained that her child couldn't ride because he was too short. I suggested again that they try the smaller version near the entrance. The woman insisted it was fine because she would be with him and could hold him during the ride. She actually tried to push past me to get her son onto the ride. I stood my ground and blocked her path. I explained again that we couldn't allow anyone under the height limit to ride because the safety equipment wouldn't hold someone too small, and her kid could fall off. She demanded to speak to my manager right away. I'd heard those words at least a dozen times since I started working there. I called my team lead over the radio and asked Karen to wait off to the side while I continued loading the current group of riders. She complained loudly that this was ridiculous and that she shouldn't have to wait longer just because I couldn't do my job properly. I ignored her and focused on getting the other guests secured and ready to go. When my team lead arrived, he listened to Karen's complaint and then walked over to measure her son himself. He apologized but confirmed that I was absolutely right and that her child couldn't ride the attraction for safety reasons. That's when the kid completely lost it. He threw himself down on the concrete and started rolling around, screaming and crying like someone had just told him Christmas was cancelled forever. He was flailing his arms and legs, kicking at the ground, and making this awful wailing sound that had everyone in the area staring. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing because he looked exactly like a piece of bacon sizzling in a frying pan. My team lead apologized again and handed Karen a special pass that would let her son skip to the front of the line at the smaller ride. After he left, Karen knelt down and started whispering something to her son. Whatever she said worked because he stopped crying immediately and got up with this big smile on his face. He walked over to the fence around my ride and just stood there watching me work. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids loved watching the rides operate and he seemed happy enough just observing. The line had died down quite a bit, so I only had about half the seats filled for the next run. I was doing my final safety checks when Karen tapped me on the shoulder. She thanked me for all my help and said she really appreciated everything I'd done. This was the same woman who'd been screaming at me 10 minutes earlier, and now she was thanking me. Something felt very wrong. She apologized for acting the way she had earlier and said she shouldn't have gotten so upset with me since I was just doing my job. I told her it was really no problem and hoped they would both enjoy the rest of their day. I turned back to my ride to start it up, but something made me pause. The little boy wasn't standing by the fence anymore. I looked around the immediate area, but I couldn't see him anywhere. That's when I noticed Karen had her phone out and she was pointing the camera directly at my ride. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what had happened. I pulled my keys out of the control panel and started walking toward the ride itself. It was designed like a circular swing set, so I couldn't see all the seats from my operator position. Karen started asking what I was doing and why I wasn't starting the ride. I ignored her completely and walked around to the back of the ride. Sure enough, there was her son, sitting in one of the seats with the biggest grin on his face. When he saw me coming, his expression changed to pure terror. The safety bar wasn't even close to being properly secured. It was barely resting against his tiny frame, and if I'd started that ride, he would have been launched into the air the second we reached full speed. I realized I could have been looking at a manslaughter charge if I hadn't caught this. I told him to get off my ride immediately. The kid said he couldn't and needed help. He was right about needing help. I had no idea how he'd even managed to climb up there in the first place, but the seats were pretty high off the ground. I lifted him down and set him on his feet. He immediately started crying and ran toward his mother as fast as his little legs could carry him. That's when everything went from bad to worse. He was running so fast that he tripped over his own feet and went down hard on the concrete. When he got back up, his nose was bleeding and both his knees were scraped up pretty badly. Karen started screaming like someone was murdering her child right in front of her. I ran over to help the kid and make sure he wasn't seriously hurt, but before I could reach him, Karen charged at me and slapped me across the face, so hard my ears rang. She yelled for security at the top of her lungs. Two security guards came running over within seconds. One of them asked what was going on. Karen immediately accused me of assaulting her son and claimed I had thrown him off the ride onto the pavement. Did she really expect them to believe I had somehow launched her child 10 feet through the air? The kid backed up his mother's story and claimed I had punched him too. The security guard asked if she wanted them to call the police. Karen said yes and demanded that they arrest me because I was mentally unstable. I was so shocked I couldn't even form words. This woman was trying to have me arrested for assault when her son had nearly died because of her stupid plan. Thankfully, my team lead showed up right then and asked what had happened. I managed to explain everything between sobs, but I was sure no one would believe me. That's when I remembered something that Karen had forgotten in all her scheming. There were 15 other people on that ride who had watched the whole thing happen. One by one, the witnesses started telling the security guards and the police what they'd actually seen. They explained how the boy had snuck onto the ride while his mother distracted me, how he'd fallen while running to her, and how she'd hit me afterward. Karen went white when she realized her plan was falling apart. Without saying another word, she grabbed her son's hand and started running toward the exit as fast as she could. The security guards caught up to them before they made it to the parking lot. I pressed assault charges against her that same day. The whole experience left me so shaken that I handed in my resignation right after giving my statement to the police. I couldn't imagine going back to work knowing that someone had tried to destroy my life just because I wouldn't let their kid break safety rules. Karen was banned from the park permanently and had to pay a fine for the assault charge. I never found out what happened to her son, but I hope someone taught him that lying about adults can have serious results. I found a job at a quiet bookstore where the worst thing I have to deal with is people who don't return their books on time. I'm half German and half American. My father is American, so I grew up speaking both languages at home. English wasn't just a subject for me, it was how I communicated with half my family. By the time I reached grade 12, I was pretty much fluent, though I wouldn't say I was perfect. The private school I attended wasn't one of those fancy rich kid schools. The tuition was reasonable, and the teachers were generally excellent. I had already completed my first degree there and decided to continue for a higher level qualification. Most of my teachers were experienced professionals who knew their stuff, especially this amazing British lady who taught advanced English. She was strict but fair, and she actually challenged me with grade 13 level material because she recognized my ability level. Then came the new school year, and with it, a new English teacher. Let's call her Karen. Karen introduced herself on the first day with obvious nervousness. She welcomed the class and told us she was very excited to work with us for the next 2 years, though her heavy German accent made her switch between languages mid-sentence. She mentioned this was her first teaching position, and you could tell she was fresh out of teacher training. She was rocking back and forth, fidgeting with pens and papers throughout her introduction. I felt bad for her at first. Everyone gets nervous in new jobs, right? I figured she just needed time to settle in and find her confidence. But weeks passed, and things only got worse. The work she assigned us was incredibly basic, like grade 7 level stuff. We were supposed to be preparing for final exams at grade 12 level, but she had us doing elementary grammar exercises and reading children's books. During one lesson, Karen was struggling to explain a simple grammar concept to the class. She was trying to teach past tense verbs, but kept mixing up German and English, saying the past tense of go was gegangen before catching herself and switching to went. When a student asked about the difference between went and gone, she looked completely lost and couldn't explain when to use the past participle. She looked completely confused, so I couldn't just sit there watching my classmates get more confused. I jumped in and explained that gone is the past participle used with auxiliary verbs like have or had, giving examples like I have gone to the store or she had gone home. Karen looked at me with anger, but she didn't say anything in the moment. This became a pattern. Karen would struggle with explanations, I would help clarify things for my classmates, and she would get more and more irritated with me. Sometimes she would ask for help with translations, other times I would just correct her when she was completely wrong about something. I wasn't trying to show off, I genuinely wanted my classmates to learn properly. Things came to a head when our grades for class participation came back. I opened my report card expecting my usual solid A, but instead found a D for communication. I stayed after class to talk to her about it. I asked her about my participation grade, explaining that I was confused about the D since I was pretty active in class. Her response was cold and dismissive. She told me that from her viewpoint I didn't say enough in class and that I shouldn't act like I already knew everything. She said I should not be so sure about my abilities and accused me of being lazy. I just stared at her. Lazy? I was the one helping her teach the class half the time. I tried to explain that I participated regularly, helped other students when she was busy, and even helped her with translations when she got stuck. She got defensive and told me that was exactly the problem. She said I thought I knew better than her and reminded me that she was the teacher, not me. I knew right then that she had it out for me, but she picked the wrong person to mess with. See, I've been at this school longer than she had, and I had built good relationships with the other teachers, especially that wonderful British lady I mentioned earlier. The next day I was walking through the hallways feeling pretty down about the whole situation when I bumped into my former English teacher, the British lady who had actually challenged me and helped me grow. She noticed I looked troubled and asked what was going on. I explained the whole situation, Karen's nervousness, the elementary level coursework, my participation grade, everything. She said it was concerning that we were supposed to be preparing for final exams, but were being taught primary school material instead. She offered to observe one of Karen's classes to see what was happening for herself. I asked if she would really do that, and she told me it was her responsibility to make sure students were getting proper instruction. The next day, right in the middle of Karen's lesson, my former teacher walked in and quietly took a seat at the back of the classroom. Karen went white. Karen was in the middle of explaining what a noun was, something we learned in elementary school, when she noticed the observer. She started stumbling over her explanation, saying a noun was a person, place, or thing, and giving basic examples like table or book. She was visibly sweating and mixing up German and English even more than usual. After the lesson, I caught my former teacher's eye. She just gave me a knowing look and a small nod. 1 week later, I was walking through the hallway when I saw Karen coming toward me carrying a box of her personal belongings. She confronted me angrily, asking if I was happy now because she got fired because of me. I looked her straight in the eyes and repeated exactly what she had said to me. I told her that maybe she shouldn't be too sure about her abilities. She stormed off without another word. Later, I found out that the administration had discovered Karen's teaching credentials were questionable and that the curriculum she was using was completely inappropriate for our grade level. Several other teachers had also raised concerns about her competency. The British teacher returned as our substitute for the rest of the year, and we actually managed to catch up on all the material we had missed. My participation grade was corrected to an A, and I passed my final exams with flying colors.